The first thing, biggest thing, and I always had challenges, regardless of the company or industry, is the accuracy of master data, because that dictates everything you design or you implement. So all these solutions, they come with some sort of buffer, and if your data is not accurate, you'll decimate that buffer in no time. And if you don't have accurate master data, all your processes and everything would be totally different. So that's my biggest, I mean, that's the biggest pain point I've come across.
Hello, everyone. My name is Parth Pathani. I am the host for Robot Forward Warehousing podcast, and today I'm joined by Naveen Chandra, a new Georgia resident. So I'm excited to talk to him. He recently moved to McDonough, Georgia, for his new job at Essilor Luxottica. Um, we connected again through a cold outreach on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn community is pretty nice and pretty cool
Mhm.
about cold outreach. I appreciate Naveen accepting my cold outreach and replying to that. I looked at Naveen's profile, solid profile coming from Medtronic, DHL, and Nordstrom. University of Minnesota graduate. I don't know how you survive in coal and then come to Atlanta, but I've been great experience knowing him last couple of months, and I was excited to talk to him, and I said, hey, why don't you come on a podcast? I think there are too many things I would love to learn from his experience, and I think audience will appreciate as well. So and he's like, yeah, I would love to do it. So that thank you, Naveen, for doing this. I appreciate it. So for the audience, could you please give a quick background on yourself so they know who they're talking to?
Yeah, sure. Again, thank you so much, Parth, for inviting me to this podcast. I would love very much to share my experience and what I've been through with robotics and warehouse automation stuff. So quickly about my background, I've been in warehousing automation for over 12 years. I started in a very manual environment, looking at trying to make some automation out of it. Started with some prehistoric AGVs to begin and some trailer loading automation. And then got some opportunities to lead some ASRS projects ramp up and also got involved in some warehouse design projects. Majority of my experience lies in implementation, which is where I realized, okay, this design may not work for our order profile. Okay, these are the um, changes we need to make. I work with a few integrators and different industries. Each industry has its own quirks and stuff. So I learned quite a lot during this process. And here at Essilor Luxottica, I lead a slotting and capacity planning team. So basically, we're trying to optimize our operations at this point and getting ourselves ready for the automation wave that's gonna hit us very soon.
Oh, that's awesome.
So yeah,
Yeah, that's awesome
I'm
actually.
I'm here.
Yeah. Yeah, I was about to say that's awesome. I think we it's it, it's very interesting to see the implementation experience. I think one of the key thing
Mhm.
that usually happens in the industry is there is a design aspect, there's a solutioning aspect, and then when the rubber meets the road, the story is completely different, right? Especially with the
Yeah.
automation and robotics, it's a new world out there, and you design and it's funny that you mentioned about the order profile changing because that's one of
Hmm.
the issue I faced in past. Where one of my previous of engagement was around like, hey, part we have unit sorters, multi shuttles, and mini load. Um, and as you can see, when you have three of these combination, it's usually a
Hmm.
high throughput operation because they're doing an omni-channel fulfillment and stuff like that.
Hmm.
And this site was acquired through acquisition, and the new owner of the building was trying to push out D2C, basically direct to consumer through that. So your order profile changed a lot. You're not looking at 10 quantities per line. But just a second.
Hmm.
Sorry for that. Yeah, 10 quantities per line, but instead like one or two, one Z's or two Z's because it's going to e-commerce. So
Mm-hmm.
The site was not hitting that numbers that they thought it will hit, because from the outside, without looking into the order profile changes, they're like, oh, it's doing 150,000 units a day, we can easily push out that. But as soon as the order profile changed, they were like
Yeah,
50,000
that
units a day. Yeah,
yeah,
60,000 units a
yeah.
day. So it's so important that just from an automation perspective, if you do not know, you end up with a big dollar amount on your balance sheet, which you cannot do anything about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll give you a different perspective from what I've seen. So I was with a 3PL and I was on the other side of the table as a customer for a 3PL. So what I've found is there is a sales perspective, and then there is a 3PL perspective, and then there is a 3PL integrator perspective or warehouse designer perspective, and there is a customer perspective. So in that environment, salespeople, they do not often have all the details of the project. So they may end up overshooting the target or undershooting the target. And then comes the integrator who may or may not have the complete details of the process or the intimate knowledge of the process as the customer does. And customers often don't have an idea of like what automation is best suited for them unless they go through that kind of project in the past. So it's it's a very interesting compromise between all these parties.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you just said four stakeholders. So um, it's very interesting to see the 3PL dynamics, because uh, you have four stakeholders. Every
Mm,
designer on each of those team either is completely educated or just knows things about it.
mhm.
The knowledge of the in charge individual on each
Mhm.
of those teams is very different, and they're
Yeah.
all trying to solve for the same problem within the warehouse, which is increasing efficiency, lowering the cost, right?
Yeah.
That's the common problem or common goal, but each of them are have a different knowledge on how to solve it, or different knowledge levels on how to solve it. And
Mhm.
as you said, it's a very interesting compromise on it. So
Yeah.
this is very interesting topic, man. Let me ask you here more.
Mhm.
if if you had this white canvas, right, and you have to
Mhm.
solve for this, where you
Mhm.
have four different stakeholders, everyone has to do a compromise and still made progress toward the warehouse automation and robotics
Mhm.
implementation,
Mhm.
how would you think about it? How would you solve for this?
Um, well, let's take 3PL aside for a minute. So let's start with like we have three different stakeholders and they have this white canvas and they're trying to design a warehouse solution. So the first thing is to get the operational perspective, like what's going to be our strategy for 5 years, 10 years? What are we going to do in 5 years? Are we going to increase our SKU count, or are we trying to get closer to the customer or improve our SLAs or reduce our delivery time like Amazon does? So once we establish that, that's your macro objective. So that becomes the macro objective for your warehouse or your warehouse design. So once we get that, then we pull our historical data, we pull our projections, forecast, we put together a macro solution like, okay, this is the square footage I need, and this is the yard I need. This is the location of the warehouse with the transportation and all that stuff. Um, so once we get to that part, that's when we go into the warehouse and putting together different pieces of automation. Okay, so this is my order profile. I'm gonna do 50% of direct to customer and 50% wholesale, or I do store fulfillment. So depending on that, that's when, based on the volume, whether to go for AMR, whether to go for peak module, whether to go for ASRs, that dictates that kind of automation. And also, there's another aspect, budget. So they have to
Mm,
stay within the budget. And then, so once we put together, you get a rough idea. Okay, this is going to be our total expenses, and this is going to be ROI. And then from that point onwards, it's going to be iterative. Like,
mm,
um, I may choose AutoStore, I may choose Exotech, or I may choose Dematic Multi-Shuttle. So is the maturity of the equipment or maturity of the integrator. and how well that automation did in the past with similar product profiles. So all these factors come into play, and the back and forth with executive team for whom none of this matters. All that matters to them is how well are we getting close to our objectives, which is speed play or
Mm-hmm.
volume play. So,
Gotcha.
so to design a warehouse, it's I would say it's an iterative process. You start with macro objectives and then go into details and then keep improving it.
Gotcha. So I was just taking notes. I think one point you really mentioned was, which was very interesting to me, the parameters that went into decision making for
Mm-hmm,
within the four walls when you think about an auto, like an auto store, Exotech, multi shuttle, stuff like that. I think one thing was like when we look at the five, let's say 5 to 6 high level parameters that goes into as an operator. Like for example, you worked at different companies as an operator. You were
mm-hmm,
in your experience, you have tried to work with multiple companies, multiple automation providers. I
mm-hmm,
think there are some high level parameters, of course, not going into details, but
mm-hmm,
when I think about high level parameters, the first parameters that comes to mind is the capital, like how much it's going to cost me,
mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
The second one is the maturity of that automation or that SI
Mm-hmm,
who is implementing it, right? Is it like today I have it and 5 years from now I won't have it kind of thing?
mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
so that second parameter that I noted down. Third one is around lead times and timelines. Of course, that hey, if it's gonna take 2 years for me to implement that, maybe not
Mm-hmm.
work with me because I don't have that much runway kind of thing.
Yeah.
And fourth one is of course though you have to make sure that it's a right solution for the right problem. So that
Mm-hmm,
solution fit conversation. Um, I think the fifth one, and again maybe this is something I want to touch base, was around is there a parameter that you guys look into when it comes around like hey how disruptive it is going to be to my building if it's a brownfield implementation? How do you
mm-hmm.
weigh that? Is it 20% in your overall decision making process, or maybe path it will work around it? How do you think about that?
Brownfield is quite tricky because it's like open heart surgery. You keep running the operations, yet you still make that change in your warehouse. So one way to approach it, it's going to be a temporary disruption for the operations. Either you increase your capacity or expand the warehouse by a couple of 100,000 square footage, depending on the operation. But also, we have to make sure that all the backup plans are identified. For instance, I worked with a med device provider, and we were in a similar situation. Um, so one thing we did is to make sure that all our operators are trained to follow the backup processes. And also we have extra capacity identified to if expand the footprint and we make the backup plans because whenever you implement an automation, it may or may not stick to schedule. So that it may take longer or it may need extra capacity or you find a bug in the software or you find a bug in the design. So the operations has to plan for some kind of buffer. Let's say the project on paper it takes 6 months, so you plan for 8 months and have that backup capacity available. And depending on the industry, you may have to go additional mile. For example, if you're operating in two different states, you may have to extend lease in two different buildings, and then you work with the local government bodies to get that approvals and stuff. And then, of course, there's a cost piece there. Um, so, yeah, each industry is different from that perspective when you add a new automation or get some new technology into the operation. And then the other piece is the training of the personnel. So I always say that any automation is as smart as the people that uses it. If you have automation and you're not using it the right way, then you may be bleeding money somewhere. So getting the right people involved, getting the right people trained, and um, have that documentation readily available for training is crucial. In the past, I've faced a lot of issues with like with AutoStore because the system is perfect, but the people are not trained. So that's another thing. And the last thing is have some maintenance people available readily, at least for the first few months of the operation, because that's when people try to find the bugs or people try to work around the system and may break some things. And once you put all your inventory inside it and it breaks, then a lot of these automations may not have, um, what do you call it? Like you can't, sometimes you can't access the inventory. If it breaks, then getting it manually out is almost next to
Yeah,
impossible. So, of course, having that maintenance team readily available is another crucial
that is
factor.
true. Maintenance is such an important point that I feel like one of the key thing that I've been advocating is like you don't have to involve the maintenance perspective as your like initial stages of your discovery, but as you go closer
Hmm.
to finalizing something, I feel like at least having that at least one conversation around maintenance, like hey, if you have a maintenance manager, technician, or whoever in your firm, tell them hey,
Hmm.
look at this, we are trying to implement this, get their perspective. Or else if you don't have that
Hmm.
individual in your team, be prepared to have conversations with your provider. Is like hey, how should I have a plan for that maintenance, right? It should not be an afterthought,
Hmm.
because if it becomes an afterthought, as you mentioned, like there are some systems which are pretty dense, right, and getting inventory out
Hmm.
of it is so hard. Even for like multi shuttle
Yeah.
systems or shuttle systems, probably you can get the inventory from the first or the second floor, probably.
Hmm.
But then you have shuttles that are going so high, it's really hard to get the inventory out. If it's a mini load, it's just
Yeah.
hard solution, hard inventory to get out. And if it's just a tote based system, even that's hard too. So I think
Hmm.
it's very interesting and very important point that I feel like in the I would say the awe of automation and robotics, people tend to forget this, and it's an afterthought,
Yeah.
and it afterthought can be really expensive.
Hmm.
That's makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. One
Yeah.
more thing I'd like to mention is like when you get a new automation into a brownfield building, it should be thoroughly vetted end to end because the compatibility of the automation with the existing process, that's very important because you may optimize storage, but you may not optimize
Mhm.
shipping or packing, or you may be losing somewhere. So once you introduce automation, that flow has to be thoroughly evaluated, like where you're optimizing and what introducing automation does to other processes in the
Makes sense.
warehouse. So I've faced issues with that part in the past. So as an implementer, I would be very cautious about what this automation is going to change in my
That's
building.
actually a very good point. I think one of the themes that I've been seeing is this conversation, and of course, the conversation have changed over years. Right, 2021 was like, hey, I
Hmm.
just need some automation. 2023, twenty twenty
Yeah.
four is like, hey, if I put this here, what will happen downstream or upstream, right? That's the flow
Hmm.
bottleneck creation. And I think, and again, I think that that's a natural evolution, if you will, because when folks were
Hmm.
thinking about automation in the beginning, they didn't really understand that it can create that bottleneck
Hmm.
started getting introduced after putting that automation or that solution into that. But like
Hmm.
as folks who have implemented the first round in 2021, they learned it doing hard way. Folks who are trying to implement it right now can learn from them and actually think through the whole process,
Yeah.
right? That okay, I'm putting a cube ASRS or a good superson solution. How I think about packaging's
Hmm.
outbound side, because and again, many times what I've seen is, and this is just my personal opinion, is like as someone who is designing the system, I am very much focused as a seller of a system. I'm very much focused on
Hmm.
selling that system, making sure that system is really optimized to the right parameters. Right. So, for example,
Hmm.
as we mentioned about 20,000 units a day or 65,000 units a day, I'm really looking to solve for that problem. How much space do I need? How much bins do I need? How much
Hmm.
robots do I need? I'm very focused on pigeonholed, if you will, in solving for that, right?
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
folks don't understand that, as you mentioned, like if yes, I solve for that, that's great. But how do I marry stuff now
Mm-hmm.
in the packing station if my inventory is coming from two different area, right? What is my merge
Mm-hmm.
process or consolidation process? How is my inventory being conveyed from, let's say, 100 feet away, which has an automation, and from to my packing
Mm-hmm.
station? Like, what's that process? And as an end user, not many times, not everyone is DHL, UPS, or FedEx, right? They don't have those skill sets
Mm-hmm.
internally to
Yeah.
think through that. So it's very
Mm-hmm.
important problem. And whenever I engage with the clients, I'm like, guys, we have to think through that, because you can make this really beautiful, really nice, but it will not
Mm-hmm.
provide the importance savings that you needed down the stream, because now you have a water
Yeah.
spider just moving somewhere and doing that. So I completely
Mm-hmm.
agree, and it just validates the point that you are saying, that yeah, I think com- complete design, not just like, hey, one part
Mm-hmm.
and optimize for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very interesting conversation, Naveen. I think I know we've had some talking points to go through it, but I think we completely threw that off the. So no, I appreciate you entertaining the questions and answering those things. I think
Mm-hmm.
one of the, as we are talking about like how things have been different when it comes to implementation, and I think
Mm-hmm.
that also tells us the gap that exists between an engineer's vision and then like an operator's vision, right?
Mm-hmm.
We both are
Yeah.
thinking differently.
Mm-hmm.
So have you come across an example, maybe, or just from your time, in your
Mm-hmm.
experiences, like uh, where that input from operation, right, really changed the way you
Mm-hmm.
were thinking from automation solution, right? Say, for example, and again, I'm just trying to this doesn't apply, just trying to hyperbole here, is like
Mm-hmm.
you were going down the auto store solution or exotech solution, goods to person solution, and then you started talking to operators, and operators gave you some key insight that actually completely changed your way of solving for that same use case and now using something else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Um, Not necessarily changing the automation because I always started in the implementation phase, and at that point, it's almost impossible to change the solution. But it changed the way that the operations or work or the way we slot different products in the different areas of buildings has changed. And it's not like e-commerce where you ship to a lot of customers, but then they still do have some direct to customers and some retailers, some other um, medical providers. So one of these products that we were dealing with, it's a particular family of products. Um, we were trying to put that in a goods to person store, goods to person system. Um, but the profile of that product family is so different from everything else that made it very inefficient to put inside goods to person systems. So these products, they come on pallets and they often ship on pallets. So we never ship cases or individual units. And what we had been doing is breaking those pallets, decanting them into the system, and then picking them, making those pallets again to ship them as pallets. So that part, the designers of the goods to person system, they don't need that part. Of course, they need for the volume calculations and the storage space estimations, but the people who operate the automation, they did not completely understand what kind of product this automation or goods to person system is best suited for. So while doing that, with the feedback from operators that had been dealing with that product for so many years, um, my team made the change and pulled that product out of the goods to person and made it more efficient. So my point is, there is a lot of subject matter expertise on the that's with the operators. It may or may not be documented, but we find all these curveballs during the implementation. But if we go back to our end-to-end thinking, so if we had evaluated the product profiles for all the products, if we had gone through that end-to-end analysis, they would have found that different order profiles well ahead in the designing phase. So that would have made this possible much ahead.
Mm.
So
This goes back to what I've been coming across a lot, and again, this is always a dichotomy, if you will. It's like, hey, I need to measure twice before I cut it, versus like, hey, I need to
Mm-hmm.
implement something because I'm bleeding. Right? It's like how far speed versus effectiveness. It's always something that we have to
Mm-hmm.
find a compromising solution, and I think
Mm-hmm.
that's. And I don't think so. Anyone has found a magic spoon or magic wand to solve for that. But I
Mm-hmm.
think to your point, it ends up coming down to implementation teams and the support teams afterwards, like, hey, yeah, you thought about it, but I think we went really fast, and now this order profile doesn't support this
Mm-hmm.
thing. And it's 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 a very interesting problem, I would say, the industry is facing,
Mm-hmm.
because yeah, I hear what you're saying, right? When the order profile change and stuff, like order profile or the SKU doesn't shouldn't be in the good person solution, and they should have caught it. But now I'm thinking from a seller's
Mm-hmm.
perspective, like what could have gone wrong, or what were the
Mm-hmm.
sellers or the designers were thinking that they might have overlooked this. So again, I don't know
Mm-hmm.
what happened there, but I'm just thinking out loud. Very interesting, very interesting.
Yeah. Also, another thing that I've seen is that a lot of times the integrators they put a lot of focus on the machine. I mean, the brains of the goods to person system, but the interfacing mechanisms, for example, the workstations for the operators, they put very less focus on those. Because I've seen terrible ergonomics and operationally terrible designs. Like, let's say I'm trying to pull out a bin and I have this long conveyor which has 100 bins. I pull out a bin and it will be one of them. Now, as an operator, I have to search through 100 bins to find that single
Mm,
bin. And it's not
mm,
easy because each bin has like a 10-digit
mm. Oh,
number.
okay,
So
interesting.
that's just one example. And then there comes the ergonomics, like lifting the bins. How heavy is your
Mm,
tote, and what is the limitation on the tote? That kind of stuff. So often this stuff that comes to light during implementation phase, but I haven't seen anybody put a lot of focus on that.
you had me there speechless, because I think that was such a solid point. I think, and I think maybe any SI who is listening, think about this, because I think that is, I see that, I will validate that point that you just said. I think everyone
Hmm.
focuses a lot on the system that they are designing it, which is great to do, because that's what they should be
Hmm.
doing it. But I think there is
Yeah.
also, like, I would say 20 to 30% focus should be on the, like, the inbound and the outbound processes, how to convey
Hmm.
stuff to your system versus, and how to convey systems out of your skew out of your system. I think that
Hmm.
is something, not convey, but maybe just get out. Maybe if you put in on AMR or Eurosort or anything like that, just do something that you need to design for that.
Hmm.
Yeah, that is such
Hmm.
a, yeah, it just reminds me of memory. So that's why I got a speech. I was like, wow, that's exactly the problem I'm facing right now.
Yeah.
That is.
Yeah. I believe from COVID onwards, there is a explosion of a lot of new automation products. And I believe this is the necessary evil that's part of evolution of all these products. So as we go to mature the technology more and more, we'll have sophisticated designs,
Yeah,
I
that is
believe.
true. And we might have some tools
Yeah.
as well as we think about it, because I'm hearing a lot about digital twins, really helping solve for that, visual
Mm-hmm.
simulations and the visualization helping for that. Um, but again, that
Mm-hmm.
has not penetrated the market yet, just because I think uh, there are tools, but from the end user side, the adoption of that tools takes
Mm-hmm.
time, right? Because yes,
Mm-hmm.
there are softwares that I can buy, but how can I justify to my leadership that, hey, we need to invest in this software, because
Yeah.
I can simulate it and visualize it for you, but it's usually an afterthought for leadership right now, because they have not been used. They are used to Excel models telling you, or Python
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So
Yeah, I had similar
yeah,
experience.
so that is, I think it will be there soon, but I think that's something I foresee as well. Like most of the designs that we do right now are usually Tableau or Excel based. In the
Mm-hmm.
industry that we have seen across it. I think there will be a time when it becomes simulation is not just your system simulation, but the warehouse simulation,
Mm-hmm.
because there are providers who does the
Yeah.
simulation right now, but there is that it is
Mm-hmm.
that system simulation, right? That okay, I need 10 robots to push out, let's say 500 units per hour, something like that.
Yeah. It's interesting that you mentioned that point because I had some fights regarding similar topic previously. So you have this simulation model, you have this FlexSim software, and then you try to build your system. So physically you build a system model in your um, simulation software. But then when it comes to the data, the integrator doesn't always look at the actual distribution of the data. For example, if I'm looking at my inbound data, just taking historical may not cut because there are patterns in the data and it follows some kind of distribution. It may Poisson distribution or it may be exponential distribution. So what I've seen is that either they assume a distribution instead of going into the data and investigating what's happening and using that data to create those models, which may or may not be accurate. It's a hit or miss. So that simulation loses its purpose there. And also the COVID pandemic peaks, they will totally
Yeah.
skew your data. Uh, and anybody implementing a machine learning model on the last 5 years of data, it's it's not
That is true.
the best data to train your
That
AI
is
on.
true. That
So
is true.
yeah.
And again, I think that's where I think I go back to that point that I feel like it will happen in the industry is like leaders like yourself will as you evolve in the leadership channel up the chain at the operator side, I
Hmm.
think you will start seeing the value and like, hey, you know what, I don't trust anyone's models, I trust my own model. So team, let's build this whole
Hmm.
simulation internally. You're all the warehouses. Again, this is a utopian world that I think it will happen like 5 years from now or 6 years from now. I think
Hmm.
leaders like yourself will have like a digital model of all of your warehouses, right? Not just an
Hmm.
Excel model of
Yeah.
saying, okay, my capacity is 200 square feet, sorry, 200,000 square feet warehouse. But eventually you will say, okay, I have a digital model. I know my capacity is
Hmm.
200,000 square feet warehouse, and I'm going to model a new solution. For you, doesn't matter how, at least from my perspective, what solution it could be. It could be a good person, it could be a cube ASRS, it could be a simple simple AMR solution. Not AMR,
Hmm.
AMR, I would say a fixed solution. Let's say not a flexible solution, but a fixed solution like ASRS, something like that. You'll be like, okay, this is my black box. It's gonna do me 300
Hmm.
units per hour or 500 units per hour. After that, how should I design my packing process? That's all you
Hmm.
will start thinking about it, because that's what you, I think, as operators you are already thinking about it, right? Every day morning as an
Hmm.
operator,
Yeah.
I'm looking at how many people I need to staff in my packaging, packing side, inbound
Hmm.
side, picking side. So you're already thinking about that. But eventually as an engineering department, you will start designing warehouses not on the Excel models, but on their like simulation models or just digital models, if you will. uh,
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
see the value there, because now you can see sell it properly. Because I think when you open up a new warehouse, at least when I opened up, I
Hmm.
was a couple of years at 3PL. When I opened up a warehouse, everything was on Excel, right? I need
Hmm.
this many units. Each pallet will consist 20. So it was shoes. So 20 shoe pair of shoes on one pallet. I designed that, and
Hmm.
they told us it's gonna be, I think, a million units gonna be coming into first few months. Designed the warehouse for those million
Hmm.
units, and we went million units divide by 20, give us the pallet positions, and they're
Hmm.
like, okay, these are the pallet positions we need to design, and this is what it will look like, and we need to fulfill. We started with 5,000 units a day, one shift. We designed the pack stations
Hmm.
around that, straight the takeaway conveyor, and pretty simple, right? But it was all Excel model.
Hmm.
It was all Excel model.
Yeah.
But as we evolve more, I feel like this should go into more of a digital model with some kind of simulation built into it, because that way,
Yeah.
I think there is a value. That's so sorry, I went on a different trajectory, but I think there is a value there.
Yeah. I think you just gave me a startup idea. Maybe I should I should start working on a software which takes your inputs and gives you a warehouse
Yeah,
design.
yeah. Let's talk about it. I think we
Yeah.
talked about it. Let's talk about it. Yeah, and I
Yeah.
started. I didn't start that, but I started a Chat GDP. Yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah.
actually
Did you?
tried that.
Okay, I tried. I tried to
Yeah.
model that.
Yeah, it was
It's,
cool.
again, it's something that I've been thinking as well from a design side. That because there is a
Hmm.
value there. There is definitely a value there where folks don't have to really reinvent the wheel every time, even though
Hmm.
the
Yeah.
warehouses are different. And the micro level, at the
Hmm.
macro level, they're still receiving, storing, picking, packing, and shipping, right? So
Hmm.
but yeah, anyways, we went on a completely different direction. But I think we this has been a great conversation. I mean, I do wanna be respectful of your
Hmm.
time. We are coming close to the timeline. So what I wanna ask you is one important and final question, right?
Hmm.
As you evolve through your journey from different companies moving into a leadership role, and you have seen implementations of automation and robotics throughout your journey, if you had to
Hmm.
talk to your fellow operators or decision makers, like, hey,
Hmm.
about embracing the robotics in the warehouse,
Hmm.
what would be the one piece of advice, and what would be the one piece of things to look out for?
The first thing, biggest thing, and I always had challenges, regardless of the company or industry, is the accuracy of master data, because that dictates everything you design or you implement. So all these solutions, they come with some sort of buffer, and if your data is not accurate, you'll decimate that buffer in no time. And if you don't have accurate master data, all your processes and everything would be totally different. So that's my biggest, I mean, that's the biggest pain point I've come across. And I would caution, validate your data or your design data based on the actuals. Because on paper, we feel that, okay, our data is 99% accurate, but in reality, maybe there is the data that's absent, that's needed for design, that we're making some assumptions. So that's the biggest thing that I would caution on. And then integration challenges. So oftentimes you have WCS, WS, WMS, and an ERP system. So there are a lot of EDIs, and there would be a lot of interfaces. So it's not always a soft ride. So there will be some EDI failures which would impact your operations. So be mindful of those interactions between different systems, and use an integrator which has I mean, I wouldn't say one system, it's impossible, uh, but that has experience in interfacing with your existing system. Though in future, I would anticipate a super integrator with one system to manage everything. I mean, we can change the ERP, but maybe WCS, WS, WMS all in one so that we don't have all these EDA
Yeah,
failures.
that's actually I've been thinking as well. And like I had two good points, but I'm
Yeah.
gonna be respectful for your time because I had like two follow-up questions on that, and you can see I like to learn a lot from leaders. So if you can entertain, I'm ready to ask you that question. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure. I have
Okay.
time. We can go ahead.
So first question you asked, you mentioned was accuracy of master data, and I have
Hmm.
seen that I can validate this. It's many times a problem,
Hmm.
and you cannot
Hmm.
design a system around that. So I've been thinking a lot about this, like how to bridge that gap. So
Hmm.
sorry for that. So one of the thing is, and again, this is just a thought exercise, not looking for an answer. Maybe just brainstorming some ideas.
Hmm.
Uh, uh, let's say I'm a TJ Maxx or Tuesday Morning or someone like who I I usually do not have SKU depth, right? I'm ordering some random
Mm-hmm.
things, and my
Mm-hmm.
purchaser are ordering something that they think they will sell it in United States, and they order it. So
Mm-hmm.
my SKU data is usually very different always that is coming in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Someday I might have a vase.
Yeah.
So the inventory is not you consistent. There are my fast movers, or there are A movers, of course, but then my B and C's are usually changing. In
Mm-hmm.
and for those companies, they will need automation, right? So there is no doubt that they need did
Mm-hmm.
not need an automation.
Yeah.
How do we
Yeah.
solve for them? Because they will have master data, but their master data keeps changing,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and they
Mm-hmm.
still need to solve for automation. How, any ideas, any thoughts on
Mm-hmm.
how to solve for those things?
Uh, so for retail, the scale and complexity of the master data, like different product types, different sizes, I think the automation has to be flexible. Like, for example, let's take the Amazon example. Amazon, for its scale, Amazon has all sortable items going to different warehouses, and non-sortable go to other warehouses. But for smaller retailers, it doesn't make sense to build two different warehouses. But within the warehouse, if they could categorize the products into different types, and there is a max for every automation system. So if they could categorize the SKUs that they have, there could be a solution. Like, you can deal these products with automation, and these are out of automation that may not work well with the automation. And also, um, oh shoot, I
Yeah,
lost my thought. Um,
no worries.
but having better control on your suppliers always helps, but when you have supplier from a different geography and they're the only supplier, it doesn't help much to get that information. And also, there is a lot of good solutions coming up. So when something comes in through your inbound dock, it goes through a tunnel and it records all the
Dimensions.
dimensions and stuff. I think Walmart is currently using that. So it goes through a tunnel, gets your dimensions, and there's your master data. Um, Still, I've heard from some folks at Walmart that they have issues with master data. But there are some stuff that we can do to mitigate. But designing a flexible automation system is always the
Hmm.
best. And then having control over your suppliers and getting
Yeah,
that information
makes
firsthand.
sense. And I think you thank you for validating something that I've been thinking as well. Is like similar to what you mentioned about Amazon, right? Amazon is
Hmm.
has a different SKUs every time, right? They don't know
Hmm.
what the next mom and pop seller is gonna sell on their platform and do fulfillment by Amazon. And at that
Yeah.
point, they still need to plan for it, and they have this 16 by 12 by something, which is their sortables, if you will, and then anything beyond that is called
Hmm.
non-sortables. And I think that's basically they go into like QR bots. That's what they have, and they do random
Hmm.
put away. QR bots as a size of SKUs that they fit in. Um,
Yeah.
so I think that actually helps for customers who don't have the real master data. And I've been trying to so again, I'm come from the values creating and finding the right robot solution fit for customers. And many times, like if you go beyond your standard companies who have that expertise in
Hmm.
house, I would say 80% of companies don't have that control over their master data, or they're relying on
Hmm.
something
Yeah.
else which provides, for example, if you look at car parts manufacturer distribution companies, they car
Hmm.
parts are supposed to be on this, I think, like a worldwide list where you get the dimensions, an online list where you
Hmm.
get the dimensions for that. And that's what they
Yeah.
use for their inbound. So they don't measure it in the warehouse, but they use that as a
Hmm.
reference. uh, so
Hmm.
for them that's okay, but for companies like who doesn't have that, I'm trying to use this, I would say, reverse method, where I say, hey, what's your maximum outbound SKUs or outbound packages, and I'll design
Hmm.
for an outbound
Hmm.
package instead of your individual SKUs, because you don't have it. And the outbound side, usually if you look around, you have your fast fast, a few corrugate size being your fastest movers, and then you have the
Yeah.
slowest movers. So I try to do the reverse engineering, but it also goes back to what you were saying, that if using the Amazon model, that if you have the conveyables but non-conveyors and bringing it down to the warehouse level.
hmm
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Interesting. And one comment, last comment, you mentioned about the
Uh-huh.
integrators and the WCS, WES, and like all the different players. And again, I think this is a comment, not a
hmm
question. But I do feel that there is an opportunity for like tier one players in the market to really have all of those in house, meaning that one
hmm
software doing the WES, WCS part of it, so you don't have to manage three different softwares. And I always struggle,
Yeah.
to be honest, is when I go towards, and that's one of the things that whenever I engage for someone, is like, hey, Parth, should I develop a new software within the warehousing field? I'm like, you can, but you should not, because uh, I think already as a systems leader, you are already working with TMS, YMS, WMS, ERP. You're already working with four different softwares,
hmm
and now you bring in another software that I have to manage, I have to build capabilities, I have to integrate with it. It's
hmm
always going to be a struggle, and resources that goes into it. So I'm not a big
hmm
advocate of having multiple systems, just because the management is
hmm
too much there. Of course, if you can manage
Yeah.
it, if you're a big company like FedEx, UPS, companies who have dollars on their balance sheet, you can have as many systems as you want. But the remaining 80%
hmm
should not have multiple systems. They should have like lesser
Yeah.
systems so they can manage and do the work while uh, shipping out the cases out or units out, so they can actually make the revenue.
Yeah.
Again, that's just a side comment.
Yeah. Totally agreed.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, I feel like there's going to be a big merger
yeah,
very soon. Like maybe two big companies will merge and they will merge their
yeah.
softwares.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hopefully that
Oh,
comes
okay,
soon.
interesting. I'm looking at one of the big key players out of Atlanta. We'll see.
Yeah.
That's awesome. No, thank you, Naveen. Really appreciate the conversation. I think I learned a lot, and we'll. I'm sure the audience will learn a lot as well. I think it was very interesting to learn about your journey, as well as the way you think about when it comes to automation and robotics. I think we not many often we see these leaders from the implementation side come and talk about the problems while being cautiously optimistic, which is always good, which
hmm
I feel like you are.
hmm
So thank you for spending time today.
Yeah, I really appreciate this opportunity, um, and to have this chance to share all my experience. And yeah, looking forward to
Yeah, of
do
course,
more.
man. Awesome. Thank you everyone
Yeah.
for joining today, and that's all from our side. Thank you.
You have been listening to Robot Forward Warehousing Podcast with Parth Pithan. Stay connected with us by subscribing to the show on your favorite podcast player. If you like what you heard, please rate us and help us reach more warehouse robotics practitioners. Thank you for listening. Until next time.